Soccer Today is brought to you by Passion Soccer Boutique, open 24 hours at passionsoccer.ca for the love of the beautiful game. You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
Termina هناك لشوارزنيجر
Ya lo hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, golazo, 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 golazo.
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
There's days when we don't know what to talk about. Today is not one of these days. Yesterday, everything happened in LA, and to talk about all the coaching changes, brothers signings, and everything going on under the sun, Alicia Rodriguez. Alicia, how is your busy Friday morning so far?
Yeah, it's pretty busy. I'm on my way to the LAFC press conference right now. Stuck in LA traffic, of course, but a lot of exciting stuff happening right now.
Alicia, everything is happening is the way to put this. Let's, I guess, go chronological on the day. The first news broke was that Ziggy Schmidt had taken over, that LA had made the coaching change. How surprised were you by the Galaxy's decision to pull the trigger this early into that reign?
I was a little bit surprised, but I would say on the whole, I think it made a lot of sense. I think it seemed pretty clear that the season was slipping away from the Galaxy, and I think they had to really make a decision if they were going to try and stick it out and see if they could really do a rebuilding project, which could take years, or if they wanted to jumpstart it, prevent that from happening, and make sure that they righted the ship as much as possible this year. And in that regard, I'm not surprised. And certainly with the appointment of Siggy, not particularly surprised either, except for the fact that, obviously when he was fired by the Galaxy over a decade ago, it didn't really end well between the parties. But I guess enough water has passed under the bridge that, that everybody's on the same page now, and it worked out for them, I guess.
And I guess that's the next question, the next natural question to that. As you said, it's a decade or so ago that Ziggy Schmidt was with the Galaxy. Of course, had wonderful success with Columbus. That was maybe probably his best work, I think, taking that Columbus team into a powerhouse in the late part of the last decade. And then, of course, the time in Seattle, which he never could quite get over the playoff hump. Some people have argued that Schmidt maybe is a product of MLS 1.0, 2.0, and that MLS 3.0 era. I love the 3.0s. When do we have 4.0? Who knows? But they wonder whether he is the right man moving forward. Do you feel that Schmidt still has what it takes to be successful in this league?
Yeah, I think that's a legit question, and I think that's something that's up for discussion, frankly. I mean, we'll have to see how it turns out. I got the impression personally by the end of his time with Seattle last year that he seemed pretty burned out. And I kind of thought at the time that he was probably going to retire because it seemed like, things had just sort of run their course in Seattle. And to my surprise, I mean, he pretty quickly started pretty publicly lobbying for another job and getting out there and saying, yeah, I want to get back into coaching. I'm ready. I'm hungry. I'm ready for it. I think compared to some of the other guys that we've seen recently who time has passed by in the league, Dominic Kinnear being fired and his team almost immediately playing substantially better, I think is a pretty good example of that, sort of 1.0 to 3.0 transition. I think in Siggy's case, we'll have to see. I think he certainly has the track record that means he probably deserves another chance, but I could very well see him struggling with, a league that continues to rapidly evolve.
And on top of the LA Galaxy firing Sigi Schmidt yesterday, I don't know if it's a coincidence or if it's a shot across the bow, but LAFC announced their first ever head coach, none other than Bob Bradley. Kind of a big surprise in a way, but it makes sense. What was your first take when you heard the news or when you heard the official news that Bob Bradley will be the head coach of LAFC?
My first thought was, yes, I called it, because I talked to another reporter over the weekend, and we were like, hey, who do you think it's going to be? And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's going to be Bradley. So my first thought was, all right, I got this. But seriously, my second thought was, I think it was pretty expected at this point. I think there had been talks that Guillermo Barros Schelotto was in consideration for the job, but after he signed a new deal with them, that was pretty much off the table. And then, kind of thinking about it in recent weeks, I think the main candidate who had been publicly connected to the job, who still didn't have a job, was Bob Bradley. And so in that regard, it all kind of lined up and made a lot of sense. I think it's a good appointment. I think he's somebody who has MLS experience, obviously of a prior era, but he also has a lot of experience that basically no other American coach has, or no other coach, North American coach has, really. And so in that regard, I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see how he kind of combines those experience bases together in this new job.
And what is the feeling of the fan base after the announcement yesterday? We all saw that video on social media where you see the hat and the Adidas overhaul, and then slowly he raises his head and look, it's Bob. What are the fans' reaction having a name that they actually recognize as the head of their team?
Yeah, I think it's mostly positive. I think there's always going to be, whenever you have an expansion team, and an expansion team that is purporting to be ambitious, very recently, team president Tom Penn mentioned that, nothing is off the table. We could sign anyone. We could sign Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo, and that kind of raised some eyebrows for me. Not that ambition isn't a bad thing; it's a great thing. But given that they're trying to raise the bar so high, of course there are going to be people who are like, "Oh, really? This guy, Bob Bradley, really?" And of course, there was a segment of people who felt that way yesterday. But I think on the whole, especially among people who kind of understand the ecosystem that is MLS, I think by and large the fan base was behind the appointment and are pretty excited to see what he'll be doing.
Alicia, I'm wondering just on a personal level whether you were sort of excited by this because it sort of connects you to the club that you lost there a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that was one of the, I guess, knocks, and it's entirely predictable. I mean, I think anything that connects Chivas USA to LAFC is going to be seen as negative in the eyes of some. Obviously, the last time Bob Bradley coached in MLS was in 2006, so nearly over a full decade since he's departed the league, and of course, he led Chivas USA for 1 year. One thing that people tend to forget, that Chivas USA team was pretty darn good. He took a team that was atrocious their first season and turned them into a playoff team in 1 year, and set them on a course to have 4 really good seasons before everything sort of fell apart after that. Cool. I don't think personally, like, I was hoping for it on those grounds. I mean, I think it's sort of a nice little footnote, and I think it's nice that obviously LAFC themselves were prudent enough to understand that something that happened, 11 years ago with a team that no longer exists really shouldn't have any bearing on what's happening in 2018.
I'm in Toronto, so I have to ask this question next. There's already some people that are fluttering about this. Any rumors out there, any suggestions that Coach Bradley might be looking to reunite himself with his son?
Was sort of a speculative rumor yesterday. Sam Stashkal of MLSsoccer.com said that he heard from people around the league that they thought that it was possible that the Bradleys could reunite in Los Angeles. Obviously would take a blockbuster trade. And who knows if the parties even want to do it, the teams themselves, Bradley Jr. and Sr., if they would be on board, if this is something they actually want to do. Only at this point it's possible, but you never know. I mean, it's MLS. I certainly don't think anything would happen until next year, of course, but I think it's something to keep an eye on, but probably not something to really expect at this stage.
I want to go back to the Galaxy for a second, Alicia, and talk about the news that people are not really talking about, and that's the signing of Jonathan Dos Santos, brother of Giovanni Dos Santos. Will the Burners reuniting in LA be a motivating factor, basically, for Gio?
Yeah, let's hope so. I think it is interesting that, Giovanni has been kind of a disappointment. I mean, he had one really good stretch last year with the Galaxy, and besides that, it's been pretty rocky, really. I mean, he's had some good moments, but just has not been consistent enough to carry a team. It is worth noting he has played some of his best soccer with his brother alongside him. So if that can happen, good news for everybody. I also think that Jonathan, he's a good player in his own right. I mean, it's not just a matter of having a buddy along to help Gio feel good. I think he's a good player. The only thing is, I think Jonathan's skill set is pretty subtle. He's a guy that he's kind of I don't want to compare him to Pirlo, but I think he's kind of the closest analog as far as playing style goes. Somebody who is a holding midfielder, but passing is a strong suit more than kind of getting in the tackle. And so I don't know how audiences are going to react to a guy who's probably not going to score a lot of goals, who probably is going to help lock down the midfield. But is that going to be enough glitz and glamour for a fan base that's used to it? I don't know.
And when you're looking at where the Galaxy goes from now, they changed the coaching from Kurt Onalfo to Sigi Schmidt. That was a bit of a surprise, but with the season they're having so far, like you mentioned earlier, it was slipping away from them. Is this what the Galaxy needed? And is this enough to turn things around? On paper, the Galaxy should have a better team than their record stands for.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I think they could definitely make a push up the table. And I think it's worth noting that for all that, Onalfo's track record in MLS was not good coming into this job. And I think it's fair to say a lot of people predicted he would struggle. In spite of that, he had a lot of injuries to key players and a lot of key players who were missing for, long periods of the season. So, Giovanni Dos Santos was gone for a long time. Jesse Zardes has barely played this season for the Galaxy. And so in that respect, it's hard to get any kind of rhythm going if your top players are never with your team. So if all those guys come together, if Jonathan Dos Santos hits the ground running, if, some of the injured guys, Sebastian Lletget might be coming back at some point this fall, if those guys start to come back, get healthy, start contributing, certainly I think the West is fairly wide open at this stage, so I think anything could happen. And I certainly wouldn't write off this Galaxy season yet, but I do think it's worth waiting maybe 2 or 3 games to assess what they're going to be like under Schmidt before we really make a projection for them.
Alicia, Kevin kind of implied it a little bit earlier, but I am curious what your take on it is and whether or not this announcement for Bob Bradley was in fact timed as a shot across the bow, so to speak, because the Schmidt hiring happened and then hours later this GIF comes out with Bob Bradley on there. Is this LA trolling a little bit?
I think it's the other way around. LAFC teased this announcement the day before, had a big hype video, tomorrow, big news. I think there's a chance, I'm not going to say for sure that this is what happened, but I think there's a decent chance that actually the Galaxy wanted to upstage LAFC on their big day and drop 2 giant pieces of news on the same day as LAFC. So, you never know. It might just be a coincidence, but the LA soccer wars may have really begun in earnest on Thursday.
What are you looking forward today in the Bob Bradley press conference that you're on your way to? What is a one question, one answer you're looking for?
I think personally, I'm wondering about Bradley entering the designated player era. You know, when he coached in MLS, it was before David Beckham arrived in the league. Obviously, the league has changed substantially. There's more than double the number of teams now. And then obviously the quality, the ability to get big name players, obviously, you know, to say nothing of TAM players, just the whole kind of lattice work, I guess, for how you build a squad has changed completely since he was last in the league. So I'd be curious. I am curious to learn sort of what his approach is going to be and what he thinks about kind of transitioning from, you know, what he's accustomed to in the league and has a lot of experience at, as opposed to how things are these days.
Well, that segues perfectly into what I was going to ask. And you can't have an LAFC conversation without sort of speculating or seeing if there's any rumors out there that have any substance to them about that first big signing that you expect that they will be making. Are you hearing anything on the DP front?
No, it's gone pretty quiet. You know, I've heard a few kind of whispers from, you know, secondhand sources. So it's hard to really gauge the truthfulness of some of those. A lot of the guys that they were connected to have fallen away. You know, Keisuke Honda signed in Mexico, surprisingly. I thought he was probably going to be a pretty good bet to sign, seeing as he was a free agent, but he went to Mexico instead. Andres Guardado opted to go to Spain instead of coming over. Chicharito, of course, went to West Ham. So, you know, things are kind of falling away a little bit. So I don't think that they're in any sort of panic mode. I mean, there's always more fish in the sea, as they say. It seems like Wesley Schneider is the biggest name being linked to the team at present. He still is without a team as far as I'm aware. So that's certainly a possibility. I mean, obviously players who are on freeze are, you know, considerably more valuable in MLS because you don't have to pay a transfer fee. But we'll see. And obviously there's always the Zlatan factor. And of course, both LA teams have been linked to him at various points. So it would be very interesting if one of the LA teams end up signing him, seeing what the reverberations would be on the other side.
All right, to wrap up, let's look south just for a little bit. And I'm wondering what you feel the current condition of the San Diego MLS expansion bid is.
Well, it's pretty interesting. I think the bid group themselves kind of tipped their hand within the last week when they started a campaign to rally for the last two spots. So they basically said, yeah, we're out of the next two selections. We cannot be in the teams that will be called this year, but we hope to be one of the last two teams that'll be called probably next year. And if that's the case, then you know, they might be able to do it. I know that MLS is really high on them. I think basically if they can get their ducks in a row with the stadium project, they're pretty much rubber stamped in. But that's obviously the whatever $300 million question, $500 million, whatever it'll turn out to be. If it comes to fruition, that's the big question, is if they can actually get a stadium plan together and approved by the local government.
I was watching a CFL game last night where there was a fellow there from San Diego who basically, when the Chargers left town, decided that he was no longer going to support the NFL, actually adopted the Winnipeg Blue Bombers because they have a lightning bolt on some of their old uniforms, and flew to Winnipeg to support his new team. So I think there might be some fans out there that are catchable if MLS gets in that market. Alicia, anything you want to promote before you say goodbye?
No, I'm just writing pretty regularly over at Angels on Parade, and I'll have plenty more stuff based on the press conference today and in the coming days. So yeah, check me out there.
All right, thanks as always, and hope you enjoy that run in to finally get a team back to follow day in, day out.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for having me on, guys.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Soccer Today is brought to you by passionsoccer.ca. Go visit passionsoccer.ca for your gear, for your lifestyle choices, for your shoes, your shirts, your everything you need to represent or play the beautiful game.
Kevin, so if I was like a minor soccer association and I was looking for some good deals, would that be a place you could look?
Absolutely. passionsoccer.ca. And there's always not just good deals, but good gear especially. And great as well people working at Passion Soccer Boutique and passionsoccer.ca. Duane, yesterday was a big day in the news. We've talked about LA's busy day and all, but we're back to normal. There's games in the weekend too.
Yeah, there are games in the weekend. I did want to really briefly talk about the LA situation first off from our perspective, though, because I have a take on this, and I don't know whether this is a hot take or whether this is a lukewarm take or whether this is just me talking out my elbow. I don't know, but when this switch and they moved away from Bruce Arena in the last year, they sort of quite publicly suggested that they were going to look for a new approach, that they were going to try and build from within. They weren't going to go big splashy DP signings anymore. They were going to try and be an academy team. But then on the same day, they bring in an MLS 1.0 coach who was notorious for working with big DPs in Seattle, and they sort of bring in a big DP signing in Jonathan Dos Santos, which had been rumored to them for a while, but nonetheless, it seems to me that LA has, like, within 1 year, because things weren't instantly going okay for them, has completely switched gears. And I
went back to where they
were. I don't know whether that's the right way.
Wait, what's the saying? When it hit the fan, you go back to what you know best, right? And maybe that's what LA's doing. Like, you know what? We tried this, like, more depth type of team. Forget about it. Let's bring a coach we know. Let's bring players we know. Let's right this ship. Maybe that's what they had in the back of their minds when they act on it a few days ago.
Well, and it's interesting to me too, because look, I think a balanced approach is what you need right now. If you listen to, you look at the most successful teams that are currently in the league right now, they're teams that have the DPs, but they also have, academy players, and they also have depth, and they also have drafted well. Like, I mean, you got to get everything right anymore. I don't know if LA's sort of shortcut approach is going to work anymore. And I really can't help but think that a little bit of this decision was driven by fear of LAFC. They're afraid they're going to lose that market if LAFC comes in and has a big splashy signing to do this, and they probably knew that Bob would have known that Bob Bradley was coming in. That it's a big city, but it's a small city when it comes to the soccer community, I'm sure. So
especially the fact that the Galaxy's not even the same city. Like, let's face it, Carson's not LA, and if you are a resident of Santa Monica, of Venice Beach, of Hollywood Hills, of LA, basically, you're not going to associate yourself with the Galaxy. They're too far. It's Carson. It's not the same. LAFC, though, especially the first year when they're playing at the Coliseum, you're going to get that belonging feeling, right? And the colors, the look, it reminds me of the Raiders of the late 80s, early 90s, right? And that's not a coincidence, for sure. And that attitude already, signing Bradley, big name, and we're going to see probably big names DP too, coming into the league with an attitude saying, look, it's our turf, and we're claiming it. And I kind of like it.
Look, they have the advantage, too, of coming in after NYCFC, because there was a lot of suggestion that New York couldn't handle two teams, that the Red Bulls weren't completely selling out their games, so how possibly could you put another team in there and have them be successful, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There was questions about the ownership, too, which is a different sort of subject, but nonetheless, here we are 3 years later, and obviously it all worked out. NYCFC has been immensely successful, but both on and off the field, and the Red Bulls really haven't suffered that much. So it obviously worked there, and I think that this is sort of taken away some of the skepticism that might have existed otherwise had they launched before. NYCFC had proven that a market can control two teams, and you can do some as long as it's big enough that they have enough room for there. And I think that that this has opened the door for this kind of to happen again down the road, maybe, and then we'll see whether MLS wants to go that route. But nonetheless, this is, I think, something that, as I said, has got to make the Galaxy a little worried. This is not Chivas that they're up against. Chivas was in every way it was a desperation move of a league that was in a much different situation at the time, and they were trying to tap into a Mexican crowd that they weren't getting. They went about it kind of awkwardly in the wrong way. I mean, we're talking ancient history now. We're talking about Chivas. The 2004 is when this would have been happening, right? They launched in 2005. The 2004 is when the expansion process would have been occurring. The league was almost bankrupt at that point. It's so much different now. And the Galaxy, they were able to like excel with Chivas there because Chivas never grabbed anyone other than a hardcore diehard. And all due respect to the diehards that existed, but it's a different animal they're up against now. And they've had that market to themselves for a long, long time. And now they're going to have to fight for it. And I think that they went, you know what, maybe this isn't the time to start on a long-term plan to change our entire philosophy. And maybe we need to go back to be the big bad LA Galaxy again.
Well, I do feel that it's a weird coincidence in the timing where when LA's not LA anymore, where the Galaxy are not necessarily a powerhouse anymore. It's just a few months before the new LA team exists. It's weird, right?
Yeah.
If you have fans out that are alienated by the defeats or the lack of results or the way it happens or discipline or lackluster performance by DBs.
I think that you're going to see the dynamics going to be very similar to what we see in New York in the fact that there's going to be a very dedicated, loyal core of Galaxy fans that are going to remain regardless of where they live in the area, regardless of how closer they are to LAFC or whatever. They're going to stay with the Galaxy because they're Galaxy fans and they associate with that. But there's the fans that they're in danger of losing are the more casual, more come out to 3 or 4 games a year, sort of guys that show up in the playoffs or show up for a big game here and there. That those are the guys that might be like, they don't really care one way or another. They just want to watch some soccer and have some fun and have a few beers on a Saturday, and they may choose to go with the cool flavor in town. And I think that that's what you saw in New York for a large extent. And again, there's probably people listening to this that are diehards on both sides of the New York thing, and they're yelling at me. But the reality is that there's always a middle ground, and that middle ground is who every team is fighting for. You're going to have your loyalists, and then they're going to stay. So I really think this dynamic is going to look a lot like New York. And I think that if you look at New York right now, the cooler team is NYCFC. The Red Bulls are sort of this old, established brand that's been there forever that doesn't really look like it's ever going to change much in terms of its overall popularity. It just is what it is. Whereas NYCFC seems like this new fresh thing, and no one's talking about the Manchester City connection that much anymore outside of the Red Bulls fans trolling. It's just become
because we haven't seen it play out on the field really that much. It's been a non-issue. It's been a moot point basically.
Yeah, the only thing that Manchester City has done for them is benefit them by giving them Bear. Really,
yeah, it's
right?
the coach, and that's actually a good decision they took. So
yeah, so anything like all the fears, and maybe I'm getting up on a pedestal right now because of my affiliation, but all the fears proved to be baseless. That this isn't a farm team of Manchester City, and there's still people out there that believe that deep down that that's what's going to happen eventually. But so far, it's hard to say that. And the same connections aren't in LA, so that analogy is not there. But I do think this sort of dynamic in the market where one's going to be more downtown and one's going to be more suburban, and you're going to have that sort of divide between long-term fans that are frustrated and angry at these Johnny-come-latelys that show up for the new team. That it's going to create that sort of natural rivalry right there immediately once they launch, and then I think some of the old Chivas fans obviously will come back as well. They did have a few, so Alicia being the most famous of all. So yeah, it's going to be interesting, and I don't believe for a second that somebody wasn't trying to. Those announcements weren't timed perfectly yesterday. Whether LAFC got into the fact that the Galaxy were going to do this announcement on the Monday and preempted that by putting their stuff out there, or whether the Galaxy reacted to the guys. Because I believe that both these teams were trying to one-up each other, and that's what happened yesterday.
So the rivalry started yesterday, basically. All right, games of the week tomorrow night. Tomorrow afternoon, late afternoon, the Battle of the South, Atlanta, Orlando. That was a cracker of a game 2 weeks ago, and we have the rematch this time in Atlanta. I'm looking forward to this game tomorrow.
Yeah, I watched the last one on the Friday night. That was the late goal by Atlanta to sort of grab it from the jaws of what looked like a near sure draw at that point. Obviously, Dom Dwyer will likely make his debut, you would assume, and this is going to be the new look sort of Orlando Lions, and whether they can, whether him and Kyle Lauren can match up together. There was a rumor that rumor. There was a full report this week that said that they had turned down an offer from Besiktas. So you would have to think that if they're turning down an offer from there, which is unfortunate because then we would have had two Canadians in Turkey, in the club that's the champion there. So that would have been nice to see. But nonetheless, so obviously they're looking to play the rest of the season, I think, with Lauren and Dwyer up front. It's going to be an interesting look to see. And this probably is the match that most people are going to be interested to see this weekend. And, I had a whole article on CSN this week talking about whether Atlanta is, in fact, a Supporter Shield contending team. And I did some math and stuff like that and talked about it there if you want to go look that up. And certainly when you look at their 6-game homestand, which is happening in September, you can't discount the fact that this expansion team, maybe they are the hype, but maybe they're going to take advantage of that 6 games at home and make a challenge for Shield, which would be, really incredible if they were to do something like that. Now, spoiler alert, I don't think that they have enough games left, and I don't think that it's realistic to expect they're going to get 18 points in a 6-game homestand, which is what they would need to do to sort of realistically close the gap that they have right now. But nonetheless, the fact that we're even having this conversation almost in August is remarkable for an expansion team. And this expansion team in Atlanta has surpassed anything that Seattle did, certainly anything that any expansion team did before that. And Chicago fans, simmer down. It was the 3rd year of the league. It doesn't really count the same way.
Yeah, no, exactly. New England, Philadelphia tomorrow night as well. But Philly can continue their somewhat hot form over the last, 12 games. So they can continue. New England is a takeable team. So even though it's on the road, I would quite favor Philadelphia here.
Yeah, and there's a suggestion that, there's not a suggestion. The Revs have said that they're going to announce a signing today that's going to be either TAM or DP, which means it's going to be either a very uninspiring DP or maybe a decent TAM signing. So take it as you want, but the Revs are never going to be a team that's going to, announce a $2 million player. So they're obviously bringing in a guy around the $1 million mark. That can have great effect in this league. You can do wonderful things with those TAM players, obviously, but we won't necessarily know exactly much about him. That's kind of been the trend. When a TAM guy comes in, they're usually South American. They maybe have played for, Boca or something like that, and somebody will tell you, oh, he was great when I saw him, blah, blah, blah. But realistically, most of us don't know much about them. So we'll have to wait and see what that one does. But, the Revs, when I was looking at the underlying stuff this week, the underlying numbers, I did a lot of sort of stats work this week. They really are the most underachieving team in the league. So I don't know what that means exactly. I don't know whether they can turn that around, but there are some interesting underlying numbers to the Revs that suggest that they're better than their record. But sometimes in MLS, the cigar is just a cigar, and the underlying numbers don't matter.
Red Bulls, Montreal trying to get back on the winning side of things after a disappointing result against Dallas last weekend on the road, going to Red Bull Arena. Tough place to play. Red Bulls, slowly but surely, are having a Red Bull type of season. It's not going to be easy for Montreal.
Well, you tell me, how important is this game? Do you need 3 points? Is it getting to the point now?
Yeah. Not necessarily a must-win situation, but the Red Bulls will be a team where they'll be fighting for 4th. And if you feel Montreal's about that on paper, you need to put the result to back up that claim. And 3 points against the Red Bull at Red Bull Arena, it's not just 3 points for Montreal, it's 3 points less for New York. And that's now going to be in the conversation every time you face an Eastern Conference team from Montreal from now to the end of the season. It's not just the point you take, it's the point you prevent your opponent to take as well.
All right. Joey caused a little bit of waves this week too. He made a statement where it was, quote, I'm sort of paraphrasing Joe, but he said it was quote unquote difficult for small teams like
smaller
Montreal
teams,
to keep
yeah,
up with those
smaller teams, yeah. Well, it's more like he said it's being difficult in the financial environment now to add a third DP to the level of a Piatti and Zamali. So basically, in what the comment means is he's unwilling to, unless a crazy opportunity a la Drogba arises, and you kind of have no choice but to say like, okay, I'm all in. Outside of that, it's going to be just 2 DPs from Montreal. Don't expect a Schneider, but that doesn't mean that the Piat is not maybe on his way. I now don't know if it's going to happen. There was some flirting on both sides over the last few weeks. We'll see if there's anything coming out of this flirtation period in the next 2 weeks for Samuel Piet. Hashtag Piet Watch. We'll see if it happens. But yeah, Joey Saputo basically mentioned that with teams spending a lot of money right now, like Toronto, like Chicago, Orlando, and others in the league, it's not necessarily the best time right now to invest maybe more, because your window to be maybe win the whole damn thing right now might not be open. So if you're pragmatic about it, might as well save a little bit of money and invest on big DPs in 2-3 years down the road when the Toronto window would have closed.
Toronto window. That's something I'm not used to hearing in sports. But anyway,
You mean just this iteration of Toronto FC with Javinko, Bradley, Altidore, right? 2-3 years maybe, and then we'll start seeing things differently.
I would suggest, that TFC as it currently stands, without a flip of the roster, will probably have another 2 seasons that they are consistently at the top. They are a team that is, we might as well launch into Toronto from here. They are a team that is, I think, that was set up with mind to go to win a title and to go on a Champions League run. I believe that they're really, that's why any of these Michael Bradley rumors kind of just laugh at them, because I know damn well that one of TFC's big goals is to do well in the Champions League next year. They've got, the Montreal example right down the road that they want to emulate, and they've seen what that can do to galvanize a fan base for a period of time there. So I believe that the chances of them getting rid of Michael Bradley, who is, the centerpiece to most of what they do, as they're entering the Champions League for the first time in 4 seasons, I think it's pretty slim. There would have to be an offer that was so astronomical from LAFC that they could then take that money and bring in a player that was even more dynamic than Bradley. That would be the only way I could see it happening. And even then, I think they'd be reluctant to do it. This weekend, Sunday's game, NYCFC versus TFC, that's a huge one. Because I believe, as I said last week, or this week, I forgot what I said. I say a lot. I forget when I say them. That NYCFC is probably the most likely team to step up and challenge. This is, when you look at what they've been doing over the last 4 or 5 months, 3 or 4 months, that they're really a very strong team, and they're really doing a lot of good things really well. And they're a dangerous team that I think might be, along with Dallas and Toronto, right there. They brought themselves into that conversation in my mind as one of the best teams in the league. So I believe that, when you look at strength of schedule and where they are right now and everything else, that if you're looking at a Supporters Shield race, and I did the numbers out for the rest of the season, Toronto still really does have the advantage there, just based on home games left and things like that. But New York, if they were to win this game on Sunday and hand Toronto their first loss at home of the year, then you have to really start thinking that NYCFC might be a legitimate Supporters Shield contending team.
Yeah, and I just want to go back to Saturday night for a second. And who writes this stuff once again? LA Galaxy in the first game in charge for Siggy Smith is against the Seattle Sounders at StubHub Center. Who writes this? Who writes this scenarios?
Well, I mean, I'm sure that Ted or someone out there thinks that somewhere in MLS headquarters, they're actually like, WWE style, have like a guy, actually scripting things out. So the Galaxy are going to come off the top rope, and then there's going to be, it's going to be something like that. No, it's 1 year and a day to the day he was fired. He's rehired by LA. We kind of always knew, and we've been speculating this for a while, that the 2 coaches that were going to end up in LA next year were probably going to be Bradley and Schmidt in some order. And sure enough, we have it a little bit ahead of schedule. Certainly, all eyes will be on that game, obviously. And look, what can he really do in a week? It's not like he's going to change things overnight, right? And I do think that this is truly a Hail Mary or a distracting play by the Galaxy. I think that they realize probably that they're out of it for this year. It would take a remarkable run of form to get back into the conversation from where they are. But certainly this will be one of those days that galvanizes people and makes them want to take up and take notice. And that probably was part of the decision and the timing of it.
Yeah, another game that's interesting this weekend in the Western Conference on Saturday, FC Dallas versus Vancouver. Dallas can, continue their reign of the Western Conference with a victory here. Vancouver, difficult loss last week at home against Cascada rival Portland. Now, can they turn around, go on the road? One of the toughest places to play in the entire league against one of the best team managed, one of my best coaches of the league, Oscar Pereira. I was really impressed by Pereira's adjustments during the game last week, especially during the second half against Montreal on Saturday. And so far, Duane, by Coach of the Year, once again would be Oscar Pereira.
Yeah, well, he'd be right in there. I'm partial to the one that's in my backyard here. I think that often we overlook the team that is having the best record, but nonetheless, that's a conversation for the end of the year. Can Vancouver, I don't know. I just don't know. That's my Vancouver Whitecaps conversation for the year. I don't know. Like they make no sense. Just when you think they're out of it, they come back. When you think that they're in it, they crap the bed, right? Like that's been the Whitecaps all year in my mind. They look like they were rolling, and they kind of coughed up a hairball last week. I would be reluctant to pick them against Dallas, but then again, this is a team that who bloody knows. The question, I guess the debate this week, obviously with Alphonso Davies, is whether or not he's going to get more playing time down the end of the road. There was a bit of an interesting dynamic someone pointed me to on a morning radio show in Vancouver. The host asked Carl Robinson whether Alphonso Davies should, quote unquote,
Give
get
ice
more
time.
ice time.
What he actually said, ice time.
Yeah, he said ice time, yeah. So,
and then Robbo
I'm sure
questioned the
like
football knowledge of the host, which kind of makes sense.
I suspect that I'm not going to defend the guy, but because I mean, you're in Vancouver, you only have you have your NHL team obviously dominates your market. I get that, but you only have two other professional teams to really deal with, right? So, come on, that's a little bit more knowledge. But I don't think he actually thinks that there's ice time in soccer or that a soccer is played at ice. I think that he was like it's an indication of how like
he meant playing time.
In the conversation.
Yeah, he just meant playing time, but he didn't say it. And Robbo found a way out of the question by doing this. It's all like, it's normal interview stuff, right? But it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, he was just zoned out. Every morning show, he doesn't really care about the soccer team. He knows he has to get through the interview. Like, that's more what it indicates to me, but it's kind of funny that, a Canadian radio host used the term ice time to describe whether Alphonso Davies should play more. I think he should, and I wrote an article on CSN yesterday that sort of implied that I think it's time to sort of let the reins off a little bit on him after this performance in the Gold Cup. He proved that he can sort of step up and handle the pressure. So let it out a little bit, open the valve a little bit more and see if he can handle it a little bit more, because this is a kid that's pretty special, and I think that you want to handle him, but you don't want to completely pump the brakes too much on him either.
Yeah, no, exactly. Anything else you have on the docket for today, Duane?
Just busy. That was crazy yesterday. And this it always happens. 10 minutes after we finish the damn show. 10 minutes after they finish the show, obviously. My instinct at the time was maybe we should just do a special show. But if it happened to a Canadian team, I probably would have been calling in and trying to do something. But alas, I went, no, you know what? I'm going to get Alicia on the phone. And I booked her right away. And sure enough, bang.
Then Bob Bradley gets hired.
So at that point, I was like, yeah, thank God I booked her early, because otherwise everyone would have been trying to get her or someone else. And, Jason Davis managed to get Bradley this morning on his show down there, was the United States Soccer. So if you had a chance to listen to that, let me know what it was, because we can't hear it up here. But certainly a very, very busy day in LA, and it's going to be a very busy couple of weeks, I suspect, across the league as teams make those tweaks. It's really, I think that when we're talking about MLS 3.0, one of the sort of things that we're going to start to see with Canada, we talked about this earlier this week, is that this idea of rentals, an idea of teams loading up for a playoff run, which we haven't really seen in the past before, because the clarity's been too there. And I think that there hasn't been a distinction between the top and the bottom enough in the past that you can truly have a rental type situation or a drive, this is my window and I'm going to try and win a championship such situation. But I think that's changing now with the rule changes and the ability of teams to really load up. So I think that this transfer window in the next couple of years are going to be quite interesting in the summer as teams in fact do either decide that they're buyers or sellers, the whole baseball thing. I think you're going to see more of that.
You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. Stay tuned to our social media to get the timing on next week's show. Monday, Tuesday, we'll see the difficulties. I'm traveling to Chicago to cover the All-Star game. You will have coverage. We will find time to do some shows and link up between Duane and I. We just don't know what it's going to look like quite yet with the different schedules that's going to happen next week during the All-Star celebration. So follow me on Twitter at Kev Laramee and Duane at 24th Minute, and our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network, to never miss a live show. And as always, until next time, I'm Kevin Laramee, and have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us sportspodcastingnetwork.com. Soccer Today was brought to you by Passion Soccer Boutique. For the love of the beautiful game, Vaudreuil, Laval, Seine-au-Nord, and everywhere at passionsoccer.ca.